Insight webinar number 14, supporting apprentices. So if this is your first Insight webinar with us, then we hope you find this a useful experience. And if you've attended one before, then welcome back. Hopefully we build on the experience that you had last time around. Today's topic is taking us slightly out of the realm of policy and reform and the kind of high-level best intentions tone that features in much of the debate and discussions around apprenticeships. Today's topic is not about theory, it's about practice and it's about reality, and it's about what happens when the theory meets the everyday reality of apprentices and their line managers. So we start today's content from the position that your program has been agreed by your leadership. So your finance team are happy because they know how you're going to get that levy money back. Management has bought into the vision behind your program, and the functional leaders are generally satisfied with the intent and the principles. And we posed a question, so now what? What are the remaining steps that you need to take to ensure that your program actually delivers that vision? And if you have prior experience in apprenticeship, then I'm sure you will agree that to ensure the success of any program, you need to put the apprentice themselves at the heart of that program and design and build in effective and appropriate support mechanisms. So we're going to look at the support that you can provide directly to the apprentice and from the apprentice's own line manager to the apprentice, but also indirectly from other experts in your organization who are supporting either the apprentices or their line managers in delivering this program. So by providing that practical support, you can ensure that those apprentices settle in well, develop within your organization, and help to contribute overall to the success of your business. So today, I'm Neil Lingo, I'm the Head of Marketing for Apprenticeships here at Pearson, and my main presenter today is Anne Ashworth, the designer of our own internal apprenticeships program, and I'm also going to be joined later in the piece by two of my colleagues, Chris Verity and Tony Pitts, and I'll introduce them fully later, but they are very much at the sharp end of our program with first-hand experience of the support model that Anna is going to talk us through. A little bit about Pearson, just in case you don't have any prior knowledge of us. Why are we presuming to advise you on apprenticeships, you may ask, and it's a legitimate question. So two reasons. Firstly, we're an employer of apprentices, but we're also a leading provider of apprenticeship services. But you may be more familiar with us as the owner of qualification brands such as Edexcel and BTEC. You may have heard us in the context of our private university, Pearson College. But one of the main reasons why we are putting this webinar together today is that we have about 3,000 to 4,000 employees in the UK, and that means that we are a very substantial levy payer. So in the context of this topic, we are very much your peer. So we launched our levy aligned apprenticeship program in May 2017 with 30 apprentices in the first cohort, and it's grown to, as of now, about 88 apprentices on 16 different program areas ranging in level from level 2 through to level 6, and the near-term aspiration is that we will grow that program to 100 apprentices in the very near future. Now, today's schedule, as I said, I'm joined here today by our Head of Internal Apprenticeships, Anne Ashworth. She is going to look at the theory of the ideal support model that you could put in place, assuming you had unlimited resources and assuming that you had the appropriate buy-in from everyone in your organization. Once we have looked at that overall support model, both the direct support and the indirect support that you can offer, we're going to cut away to two people, Chris and Tony, who've got first-hand experience both as apprentices and as line managers of apprentices, and they're going to give their take. And as you'll be unsurprised to learn, they may have a different nuance on what they feel is most valuable depending on the experience that they have with their particular apprentices. And we hope that by showing these three different perspectives, you will be able to find something that is true to you and something that you can take away and action today and put in place in your organisation. So at that point, I'm going to hand over to the genuine expert on today's webinar. That's our Head of Internal Apprenticeships, Anne Ashworth.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us on this Insight webinar. I'm going to cover a number of areas under direct support for apprentices. One of them is going to be recruiting. That's what I'm going to start with, but that one will be covered in a lot more depth in our next Insight webinar. What I'll talk about is general, yes, good practice in supporting apprentices, but also some of the things that we've done with our own programme that both Chris and Tony will be able to elaborate on more a little later. One of the key things really is thinking about are you recruiting into your apprenticeship programme, or are you looking at internal members of staff coming into your programme? And to be honest, you need to look at them somewhat similarly, but also you need to take different things into consideration as well. One of the other things to think about is, are you looking for young people to come into the business? Are you considering looking at different calibers of group that are coming into the business as well? So then, starting off with the recruitment side of things. If you are looking at young people, looking at people that don't have a lot of work experience, perhaps you're looking at care leavers or people with additional learning needs or disabilities, then you certainly need to be thinking about how you actually attract them to you. Do they even know who you are? Do they know that you exist? Do they know that you're an employer of apprentices? And that means perhaps looking at different attraction strategies than you've done in the past. It might mean working with different organisations that can help you with that. It might also mean looking at different software and web pages, for example, and social media outlets that would give you access to those particular types of people. And I think it very much depends on whether you're an organisation that is looking at very much a local opportunity for some of your vacancies, or are you looking at it from a national perspective? And I think if you're looking at it from a local perspective, then you're very in tune with some of the objectives and some of the issues that that local area have got, and that will determine who you are aiming to attract into your apprenticeship programme. Certainly if you're looking at younger people, then we particularly have started to do quite a lot of work with schools that perhaps we haven't done before in terms of actually bringing people into our business as employees. That's meant us actually having to consider a school strategy, working with them in terms of how they like to operate, getting to understand what it is they're looking for from an employer. What sort of messaging do they expect us to be able to provide to them, their careers advisors, for example, and also to the young people that are looking for an apprenticeship opportunity in the future. So really getting a very strong relationship with schools or through a routeway into schools, I think is a good idea. And again, consider just how much of an effort you want to make into that in terms of, do you want to go to a careers fairs? Because that can take up an awful lot of time, a lot of resource. But is it actually perhaps hooking up with certain schools? Maybe they're STEM related, for example, science, technology, engineering and maths, and that is something that you really want to support. We particularly do work with women into technology, for example, and that will give you an opportunity to develop relationships that will then give you a clear pathway for those young people to consider you as an employer for them in the future. Most definitely, the whole recruitment process needs to be looked at in terms of how suitable it is for the type of candidates that you're looking at bringing in. You know, if you've always brought in young people, people with disabilities, etc., then you've got that all in place. If not, then it is certainly something that you need to consider. One of the things that we're looking at is actually putting together a programme of support for young people, where we might be looking at things like travel, personal security, cost of attending interviews, and thinking about how we can support on that to make us more accessible and easier for these young people to actually come to an interview and hopefully get on to an apprenticeship with us. We definitely need to do some work around the interviewing process as well. Again, think back, these are sometimes people that don't have an awful lot of work experience. So when you're putting activities together for an assessment centre, for example, you need to bear that in mind. You need to be thinking about the skills and the capabilities that you're looking at for your particular job roles, and making sure that you are not bringing any unconscious bias into the activities that you create, the questions that you structure. That, of course, also means some training for your hiring managers. And I said earlier on that, you know, you would need to apply things equally to internal people coming onto an apprenticeship. You know, they're not going to go through the interview process, etc., but they certainly would go through potential initial assessment for English, Maths and ICT. You certainly want to ensure that they have the aptitude, motivation and the career progression that would be appropriate for an apprenticeship. And most certainly that you've got the line manager and the HRBP involvement in this to support them in the time that they're going to need to do the apprenticeship. So one other thing I think is absolutely pivotal to ensuring that this is successful, and that's using your training providers. They have the expertise here, in some cases better than we do, in terms of working with candidates that we're bringing on board into an apprenticeship. And we've certainly found over the last year or so that they've become more and more involved in our recruitment process, to the point where they support us in advertising. They support us in shortlisting, they support us with eligibility checks, for example, and they also get involved as technical advisors at our assessment centres and help us sort of make the final decision in terms of candidates to come on board. And that's just part of the offer and the relationship that you build up with your training provider. But starting at that point ensures then that the candidates you bring on board are the ones that everybody feels have got the best chance of being successful. So moving on into the settling in period for an apprentice, induction, if you will. But I think for me, this is probably the most important bit, particularly with an apprentice. If you don't get the first few months right with an apprentice into the business, then that's the time they're going to leave. And so even though you could have wonderful welfare systems in place, and we certainly do, it's not always totally right for an apprentice, because there are other factors kicking in. You know, they're learning a hefty learning program at the same time as working. So it's really important that they have the correct support at the right time, and also an action plan between all of the key stakeholders in that to make sure that they're successful. So I think if they've never worked before, then obviously some of the key things are about helping them feel part of the business, making sure that they know how you operate, what your working practices are, the culture of the organisation, understanding what their role is, and the role of the people that are working around them. Definitely the onboarding process is critical. It's usually designed for perhaps people that have been working for a little while. So in terms of young people or people that are new or people that have got issues, learning issues, etc., you are going to need to think about the way that you position your documentation. Think about language, think about format, think about the way that this new member of staff is going to interact with the information that you send them. We're certainly looking at our contracts, we're looking at our letters, the level of language, for example, that we use in our letters. If we've got young people coming on under the age of 18, then we're also considering producing letters to parents and carers and guardians so that they're more involved and certainly informed about what we're doing with the candidates that are coming through. I think it's because, you know, we're a corporate organisation and things are corporate, and there's no problem with that, but sometimes you just need to flex it a little to suit the individual needs. Again, I don't think induction is something that is something that happens in the very early stages and only happens in a set time for an apprentice or for anybody actually joining the business. It's about that general drip feeding of key information so that they begin to feel more and more at ease in the role that they've got and the job that they're making. And it's making sure that whatever it is you've built into your induction is relevant, making sure that the candidates understand the processes and the systems that you've got in place so that they can get easily into the way of working quickly, rather than stuttering, not certain where to go, not certain what to ask. It's also about making sure they don't feel overwhelmed. There's a huge amount of information that people have got to take on board when they start a new job. And I think from our perspective, it's about making sure that that is managed in a sensible way. The line manager is absolutely critical to that, in conjunction with the work that we do in the apprenticeship team. So it's about making sure that that induction content actually has the right content and it's delivered in the right way to get the right messages out. And I think it's also about making sure that when you've got a probation period, for example, that the new member of staff, the apprentice, understands exactly what that is, because they might never have come across it before, for example. And if they're going into performance review, what is the expectations of them? What is the outturn of it? What is the result of it? So things like development planning, things like performance review, one-to-ones, they won't necessarily understand the language, they won't understand the purpose of those things. So it's important to be clear and to make sure they understand not just the importance, but the relevance and the impact on them and their future as an apprentice with you. So next key part is the line manager. And I would say now that an apprenticeship programme is not going to be successful unless you've got very, very well informed and motivated, keen and eager managers, because their relationship with both the apprentice and the training provider is absolutely pivotal. So we do a huge amount of work to ensure that line managers are informed as much as possible, trained on things like safeguarding and prevent, for example, but also they do work with our talent acquisition team around simple things, I suppose, but things nonetheless that might need tweaking slightly for an apprenticeship. Things like the job descriptions and the adverts, thinking about the language. Is there any gender bias in that advert, for example? Is it pitched at the right level? Is it going to be bringing in the greatest selection of candidates to that particular role? So it's important there that the line manager is as knowledgeable as we can make them. It's understanding perhaps the salary range, what that means in terms of career development for the successful candidate and they go into that role, and being clear on the onboarding process as well, so they can support the applicant through the process along with the talent acquisition team. Additionally, line manager needs to really understand the 20% commitment to off-the-job training. And in our case, and I know it's not the same for all employers, but we leave it to the line manager, the candidate and the training provider to determine what that 20% looks like. We know that there is formal learning in there, but that will be done in different ways depending upon the programme and the training provider. But also we need to take into consideration business constraints, and we're a sort of company that has certain times of the year where we're exceptionally busy, and so our training providers need to negotiate that with the line managers and the apprentices to ensure that nothing really critical in the apprenticeship, like maybe gateway or endpoint assessment, happens at a time of year where it would be impossible for the apprentice to achieve it. The other part of that role is their relationship with the training provider. Together, along with the HR business partner, they form a very strong support mechanism around the apprentice. So there needs to be strong communication. They need to be able to rely on each other to keep themselves up to date with what's happening. They need to be able to turn to each other and ask questions, to raise issues and to resolve issues. I certainly get involved if things are escalated to me, but I do expect that line managers, along with the trainer assessor, deal with things that come up on a ad hoc basis, if you like, that need to be sorted out pretty smartish. And that means they need to understand how the training provider works. And certainly we do some work with the training providers to ensure that they are familiar with our systems, our processes, the language that we use, so that they can have a very open conversation and everybody's sort of talking about things in a way that's totally understood. So certainly being up to date with company policies, procedures and working practices, values is absolutely critical. And then ongoing support. There are some things that I think are absolutely critical to ensuring success of a programme, and they're not the things that are necessarily referred to in the funding rules, and they're not things that naturally pop up, I suppose, but they are things that actually, if you think about it in the light of day, are common sense. And there are a number of elements that we've put in what we call our learner voice strategy that we think are critical but also hugely beneficial to our apprentices. So we always ensure that every apprentice has a dedicated mentor in addition to their line manager. For those of our apprentices that are actually on high-level management programs, we also have an additional mentor who is a senior person from the business. And the idea there is that that mentor is about helping them put the theory into practice in terms of corporate organisation and the strategy that we're working to. We also provide a lot of additional training to help our candidates with their interpersonal skills. Some of that is through our learning and development online modules. Some of it is through some of our products that we use, like HM Global, for example. We also have developed quite not unique, but I think what I think is a well-received method of recognising development and achievement. And we use one of our products for digital badging. And that is a way of recognising ongoing development and progress of every single apprentice, regardless of the programme they're on, but focusing in on their skills and behaviours, which, as we know, is a key element of the new standards. And then also we have an achievement badge as well. And we've actually taken that badge and applied that to not just our apprentices, but to other roles within the business. We have ambassadors, and you'll hear from Tony and Chris, both of whom are two of our apprentice ambassadors. They support other apprentices and also the line managers of apprentices, so they receive badges. And if we have people that really go over and above to promote and support apprentices in the business, then again we like to show our appreciation through the digital badge. We have a strong method of gaining feedback and ideas, and that's not just surveys, which our training providers do, but it's surveys we do, yes. But we also run focus groups. We have apprentices that have their own focus groups and feedback to me, and we also run annual, what I call time to talk cafes, and that's when I go to the apprentices for some ideas that I have on ways that I'd like to improve the programme, and they can tell me how silly I am or whether they actually support me or not. I have to say they've been very supportive so far. Other things that we've done, in addition to the 20% off the job, we also give our apprentices an additional 2 hours study time each week. That's really helpful for those that are doing functional skills, but certainly we find it's great for the apprentices to catch up with their mentor, to do some revision work, maybe to have a one-to-one with their manager. We also ensure that every apprentice has a laptop, so that they can actually walk away from their workstation and concentrate on themselves and their learning somewhere quiet. And we've, again, found that to be hugely beneficial. And where we've got sites with apprentices using desktops, we also have some laptops that are available for them to borrow as well. We work really closely with our HR colleagues, who in turn support the line managers and apprentice, and they're very helpful in terms of linking with the training providers, thinking about additional learning or the next route that an apprentice might take when they're coming to the conclusion of their apprenticeship. And then we have specialist mentors who are subject specialists, and in certain cases, for example, for project management, we have a number of specialists from around the business that take on that role. And we've actually set up what we call safe projects, so that our project management apprentices can practice their skills without fear of anything that's going to be connected to business critical activity. Moving on then. Any questions?
What would be the typical discussion areas for an apprentice focus group?
Good question. We actually let the apprentices determine that themselves, because we want to hear from them what's working well and what's not working well. I suppose some of the things that definitely have come up have been issues with the training provider. Not necessarily big ones, but you always will get something, maybe miscommunication, perhaps expectations that have not been met, that type of thing. In the Time to Talk cafes that I run with all of our apprentices, the sort of things I've taken to that is the idea of doing an alumni, for example, and how well that would go down, and would that be something that they would be keen to do. Getting some of their feedback on mentoring to make sure that that's working, and if not, how can we improve it? So you've got two different types of ways of running that. The focus group, which is, you know, an opportunity for apprentices to say what they want to say, good and bad, and feed that back. And then the other one, which is where you're talking about improvement of the programme. Moving into the next section, which is the indirect support. I mean, we're lucky, we're a big organisation, and I'm conscious, obviously, that there's a lot of smaller companies out there that have apprentices on board. And a lot of what I'm saying translates no matter what size of company you are. But this particular section, yes, it is helpful that if you're an organisation where you've got lots of different functions, you can tap into that expertise. However, if you're in a smaller organisation, then perhaps those functions are easier to get hold of because they could just be a handful of people, if not just possibly even one person. So I think, you know, it's about communication and understanding and in terms of working together on that. So from my perspective, an apprenticeship programme just can't operate in a vacuum. It needs to be an integrated part of everyone's plans. And when I say everyone, I mean business operational plans, HR, finance, talent acquisition, learning development. So it does mean you need to make sure that all of those key people know what their role is with the programme, what it is you want from them, what it is you need their involvement in so that you can continue to improve things. So, for example, if you want to design a training session for line managers, then it's working closely with possibly talent acquisition and learning and development at the same time, so you can put something together that's professional, has all the key components you're looking for, and is pitched in the right way for the line managers. Example also being perhaps, you know, talent acquisition. They need to adjust their attraction strategy to include schools. So you need to again think about perhaps involving the training providers in that. You might want L&D involved in that as well, because they might want to identify some internal training that might be appropriate for people to undertake. An example being safeguarding and prevent. HR, particularly important, because they're the ones that can help with employment contracts, working time, minimum living wage, but also helping the line managers with their understanding of apprenticeships and where they fit in their team, where they fit in career development, thinking about performance review, thinking about the development of that area of the business in total, really. And certainly it's about thinking, you know, how do you want your apprentices to be perceived within the business? I mean, we put our apprentices on permanent contracts because we want them to know that when they come into Pearson, we're absolutely committed to them, we're investing in their future, and we want them to be part of not just the today, but the tomorrow of our future as well. And that's things that you as an organisation need to just consider when you're putting your strategy together, really, right at the very beginning, of how your apprentices fit within the overall structure of development for individuals. So I think that's everything that I wanted to say. And if you've got any further questions, I'm sure we'll have time for that. And handing back over.
Thanks very much, Anne. As Anne said, there is plenty of opportunity to send in questions at any point. But now we're going to move on to some case studies. So I'm joined on the line from two of our other offices around the UK by two former apprentices, indeed one current apprentice, both of whom are line managers of apprentices and both of whom are ambassadors of our programme. And the first of these is Chris Verity. Chris, great to have you here today. First of all, could you tell me a little bit about your role and how long you've worked for Pearson?
Of course, yeah. So I've worked for Pearson for 4 years. I'm based in the Manchester office. I started off as an account specialist. What we do in Manchester is look after a lot of customers and help them with the administration of Pearson qualifications within the customer service setting. I progressed into a manager's position after a year of being here, and at the same time that I started as a manager, I also started on an apprenticeship in management. and there's no doubt in my mind that doing my apprenticeship at the same time as becoming a new manager absolutely supported me through the process and helped me to learn and develop new skills.
Okay, so as well as being a former apprentice, you're now a manager of apprentices in your own right.
I am, yeah. So I've managed 3 apprentices. The latest has just completed the programme last month. And what I enjoy about managing apprentices is that I have that support structure there. So in terms of developing my people, so I have that framework to be able to meaningfully enable the development of the staff, and also it brings in new skills and experiences into the overall team dynamic.
Okay, so you've got 3 apprentices in your team. What level of work experience do they have when they join either your team or when they're joining the business?
Yeah, all of my apprentices have actually been existing members of staff that have, through discussions in development sessions, we've identified apprenticeships as the most appropriate method for professional development. They're all passionate about developing themselves and upskilling, and I think the idea of gaining the qualification whilst in work is a really big appeal to a lot of people.
Okay, so when someone makes that commitment and decides to become an apprentice, what are the most difficult challenges that they face in your experience?
A lot of them have been out of a educational setting for quite a while, and they might it can be quite difficult to adjust to this idea of having study time and time where they're away from their work and focusing on the requirements of the apprenticeship. But the way that I've tried to kind of settle them into it is by working very closely alongside the assessors from the training providers, to try and make sure that the work that has been set is aligned with the culture of our company, so that it's not such a shift from work into apprenticeship. It's all very much aligned and integrated as much as possible. I'm just the other things that I try to do is to give my apprentices a project or some kind of initiative that they're in charge of, which they can run with during their apprenticeship time. So they would be, it might not be the type of work that would normally fall under their remit, but through the apprenticeship scheme, they're encouraged to identify areas of their own interest, and they then have the time and the support systems in place to focus on these. And the end result of that is it's good for their own development, but it also gives back to the team in general as well.
Okay, so aligning the work that they do with the work that they're required to do as part of their apprenticeship program. Aside from that, how else, talk me through the other support that you offer your apprentices.
Yeah, so as Hannah's already mentioned, all apprentices will get the 20% off the job study time. This is taken up by classroom sessions with their tutors. They might use it to complete their portfolio and do research and revision. Also, examinations and progress reviews would fall under this time. But as a manager, I try to take an interest in everything that they're doing during this time and to ensure that they're on track. I also meet regularly with the training provider assessor, and they're often 6-week review sessions where we can discuss the progress of the apprentice. This allows me to then schedule the overall team priorities and work out what we can work on in the next few months. So it's having that close relationship with the assessor is absolutely invaluable. In terms of kind of empowering the apprentices themselves, we've established, again, Anna's mentioned this, but we established a monthly forum for all of the apprentices within Pearson. And this is an opportunity for them to share the best practice amongst themselves, and it gives the people in charge of the apprenticeship a good idea as to how they can improve the support by actually listening to the apprentices in this setting. And finally, I think it's very important that we champion the achievements of the apprentices as much as possible, not only within the people that are on the programme, but also to the other members of the team that might have seen the apprentice but not really take too much of an interest in what they're doing. But by developing a newsletter called Aspire to Inspire, we can then make sure that everyone across the business is fully up to speed with the achievements of the apprentices, and we get to celebrate their achievements.
Okay, and do you get any feedback from the apprentices at all about which of these methods they find most valuable?
I think they're probably all quite important, because they're all, the thing behind them all is that they're remaining supported throughout their journey. But I think in terms of the one thing that I like the most is the project, because giving them some kind of work-based project, because not only does it tick off the standards for them to be able to progress through their apprenticeship, but more importantly, it ingrains them into the culture of our company, and they're leaning on a framework, and by using this support structure, it actually promotes best practice for everybody involved within that project.
Okay, brilliant. Thanks, Chris. I'm just going to move on to our second case study now, which is a colleague of mine who I've worked with for a number of years, Tony Pitts, Centre Support Manager. Tony, this is your second time on an Insight webinar, I believe. So for those of you who don't remember you from the last one you participated in, could you tell me a little bit about your role in Pearson and how long you've worked here?
Yeah, of course. I'm a manager of 2 internal sales teams, and they're actually both based in different parts, different sort of areas. One's based in Harlow, who work with FE colleges, and the other one's based in Manchester, up where Chris is, and they work with work-based learning. I've been part of the Pearson team for just over 11 years. Returning to work after having my son, started my journey as a telephone appointment maker in the primary schools division. It was the perfect job for me because I was able to work around the school holidays. After coming back to work, Neil, I really wasn't confident. So after a learning development conversation with my line manager, it was suggested that I completed a customer service level 2 apprenticeship. That really gave me the confidence I needed to return back into the working environment. Pearson have lots and lots of opportunities, so I decided to complete the team leader apprenticeship at level 3, and I was then promoted to be a team leader of a team of 6. I've really caught the learning bug by this stage. I was asked if I could complete the manager course because I could see the sort of skies opening for me, and I completed that in 2015 and was promoted again.
Okay, brilliant. So what were your initial reasons for taking an apprenticeship?
Coming back to work after having my son, I just didn't have the confidence. I hadn't been in a workplace for quite a while. But once I'd started it, I realised I could learn new skills and gain knowledge, and I could actually progress with my career. I'm now on my 4th apprenticeship with Pearson, and I'm currently doing a chartered management degree at Pearson College. It's really allowed me to expand my knowledge and find better ways of working within the business. And I've just finished my first year. I've learned so much, Neil, and I got some really good results, so I'm over the moon.
Okay, brilliant. So what impact has taking an apprenticeship had on your working life?
Well, although the degree apprenticeship is extremely hard work, I'm not going to pretend it's not. It does need total commitment. I've learned so much and the rewards have been really high. I'm now able to write proper business reports when I asked. My grammar has really, really improved. I'm critically thinking about everything. And I'm coming up with better solutions around the teams that I work with. My workload hasn't been reduced, I must say, but because the job still has to be done. But it has taught me to do something that I've never done before and delegate. So I've managed to free up some of my time, and it's allowed my teams to develop and progress too. And some of them don't feel that it's right for them to do apprenticeships at the moment, but it's giving them other work so that they can progress, you know, within the business. And I've got a more efficient team, or 2, I should say.
Okay, so the greatest challenge when you're taking an apprenticeship, you kind of touched on there, but what's been the hardest thing for you?
Definitely time management. I'm one of those people, if I want the job done properly, I think that I need to do it, but it's not true. I've learned how to delegate. It's not all about just going to college 1 day a week. On average, I study for probably further 10 hours a week. and also I'm doing my job at Pearson. It is particularly hard during the times when we've got assignments that are due in. The academic writing was also a real challenge for me after leaving school in 1980 with just a basic education. And I've sat my first proper exam in over 38 years. That was back in May. So I feel that I'm learning.
Okay, brilliant. So how has Pearson supported you both as an apprentice but also in your regular role?
Well, without the support of Pearson, I don't think I could have got through this. As I said, with the basic education I left school with, it was something I never thought I'd reach, you know, doing a degree at university. I get my 1 day a week, which is my 20% learning. When I'm at college, that's what I'm doing. But on other times, I'm doing placements with other parts of the business. I'm at the moment organised a placement with the contracts department and also the marketing department, because they're the modules we'll be learning into year 2 in the autumn term. Again, as both Chris and Anne said, I get 2 hours a week, which is for learning. And sometimes I do actually save that up and take sort of a whole afternoon so I can get my work done. As said before, I have a mentor who's amazing, who helps me, and I show them my work and just get some feedback of what they think. And the senior mentor and also my line manager, who support, guide and encourage me right the way through. There's times when I've really felt I can't do this, and it's just getting that support and encouragement from those groups.
Okay, and if you had to pick, would you be able to choose any of those as the most valuable mode of support?
Obviously, they're all amazing, but I think probably the people around me, my mentors, my line manager, my team, they understand what challenges I'm going through, and other parts of the business that are willing to sort of take me into their departments and show me what they know to learn new skills.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you, Tony. So we're going to go into questions at this point, and there was a question that came in towards the end of Chris's interview that was directed at him. So if I can just bring him back in to answer this one. Chris, all of your apprentices are internal candidates and presumably all work in the same team. So does this mean that your department sometimes struggles to cover their work when they're all away at the same time each week? Have you got a process for managing that?
Yeah, it's very rarely that they're all away at one time doing their work. Maybe once every quarter or so they might be in the same workshop, but their kind of study time we split out across the week, so they all have different times. So the duties of the team are still being adhered to. I think the best way to manage this is by just having that really, I can't stress enough how important it is to have that close relationship with the training provider, assessor, because, for example, we have a particularly busy time at the end of August where all schools and colleges and work-based learning centres get their results. So it's during the last couple of weeks in August, we block off all apprenticeship time because everybody's really too busy for anything else. But to make up for that, we would give them extra time at this time of the year when it's a bit quieter, when the schools have just broken up. So it's about kind of juggling the calendar and just being open and honest with the assessor and also the apprentice to just establish what is possible and what isn't possible. And we found that the assessors have been extremely receptive of this. But I suppose if you had a more hands-off approach to it, then that could end up in potential areas of difficulty because there's no communication there. But I think just by managing it and staying on the ball with it, we managed to negate that problem.
Okay, brilliant. Thanks, Chris. There's another question coming. There's a more general one, which I'm going to put to all three of you. And if any of you have a strong opinion, then do feel free to answer it. And that is, have any of these support processes proven after the little bit of time they've been available to have been of little value or even a hindrance to apprentices? Anyone have a strong view on that at all?
Yeah, I'll go for that one first. I think you've got to consider that all of these support processes are tools in a toolkit, and they've all got a part to play, and you just need to think about which ones are appropriate for which purpose that you've got. If you don't have that range, then something is probably going to fall through a gap, and that's when potentially an apprentice will leave or things will be picked up. There might be performance issues, etc. So what we certainly have tried to do is put a whole range of processes in place and to ensure that everybody's clear on the purpose of each of them. So I would say none of them have been a potential hindrance. They are difficult to set up sometimes and difficult to ensure that they are effective. And that comes down to myself and my team to ensure that that works. But I think they've all got the value, and it's just dependent upon what purpose you need from them.
Hi, Neil. It's Tony.
Hi, Tony.
I think just from an experience in the Harlow office, obviously we mentioned before I was a apprentice ambassador. We've got a apprentice here that felt that she wasn't doing a very good job. She didn't want to go to her manager because she didn't want her to think that she wasn't good enough for the job. And she actually got to a stage where we thought that she might drop from the programme. But she's just completed. She's done really, really well. And now she wants to be an apprentice ambassador because she said it wasn't plain sailing. And she wanted to just sort of reiterate that to other apprentices, that it isn't always plain sailing, that it is hard work.
That's great. Thanks, Tony. I was actually going to make an observation, having listened to your summary, Anne, but then listened to Chris, is that the one thing that seems to be emerging from this to me is that you cannot predict what support any individual apprentice is going to need, because, and this is something fundamental, but it's probably worth saying it out loud anyway. This is not like traditional recruitment. With traditional recruitment, you are trying to recruit somebody who is already competent to a standard that's written down on a bit of paper, and you are in essence checking off that they have competencies A, B, C through however many you have. With an apprentice, you know they're not competent yet. You know that they have some work to do, and it's much harder to ascertain to what level they're going to need support with developing any particular competence, skill, or behavior. So until you have years of data to show, you can't predict that any particular mode of support is not going to be worth the time. You actually need that track record of the program in order to validate or not.
Yeah, I'm nodding away here, Neil. You're absolutely right, and that's why I say you've got to have a variety of tools in your toolkit, because you do not know what you're going to face, but you have to make some assessments of what you might likely face. And certainly from a line manager's perspective, when you are recruiting somebody with very little work experience behind them, you're making a leap of faith in terms of their aptitude and motivation and their keenness to do the role, because you haven't got an awful lot else to base it on. And that's why, it is about understanding that this is a training role, and it's going to take a number of years in some cases to get to the point where they are deemed to be competent in the role that you've employed them into. So that does mean that you need to, as a manager, put a different hat on. You need to have a variety of support process, while the HR business partners need to totally understand what the what the line manager needs from them as well. And from a talent acquisition point of view, make sure that they've got the right recruitment processes to give you the best chance of getting the right candidate coming through. And it's interesting, I mean, it's lovely listening to Chris and Tony, and both of them have been absolutely brilliant in supporting the programme. And Tony is doing a stunning job in the Chartered Management Degree Apprenticeship programme, but she's also had new recruits coming into her team and starting an apprenticeship from scratch without the work experience behind them. And she's had to apply some of the skills that she's learned as a manager to that, probably for the first time. And, as an organisation, because we're recruiting younger people now, we are coming across things that we didn't know and didn't think about, but we are now planning it, thinking about it, and putting the right support processes in place.
Okay, and one more question coming just now. Who are you inviting to reviews with so many interested parties, and how are we capturing 360-degree feedback? So I think that's more of a policy question, so I'm going to put that to Anne first of all.
In terms of the formal progress reviews that the apprentices undertake, we ensure that line managers are always present, either physically or remotely, the trainer assessor, and obviously the candidate. And if the line manager can't be present, we involve the mentor. In certain circumstances, the HR business partner has also come along because there's something relevant to them. So we find that review is absolutely one of the key learning processes for the whole apprenticeship, because that is the opportunity to talk about things that are going on in the business, things that are going on in the apprenticeship, milestones that are coming up, maybe some external assessments for functional skills, etc. Talking about annual leave, for example, and as Chris was saying, busy times of year, and changing and having a dialogue about target setting. Are we pitching for merit or distinction, for example, on endpoint assessment? One of the other things that we've started to bring into the progress review is conversations around Pearson values and how that aligns to the behaviours and skills within each of the apprenticeship standards as well, so that we can start preparing both the line manager and the apprentice for their role in gateway and endpoint assessment. So with the new standards, we might be using processes that have existed in the apprenticeship world for a number of years, but we're slightly adapting and adding to the content around the requirements of the new standards. So we're finding that particularly a useful thing to do, and doing it sooner rather than later, so that it all forms part of that support package, not just on their personal support, but also on their professional and their, if you like, vocational education support as well.
Brilliant. Okay, thanks very much, everyone. We've had one further question come in mentioning a toolkit. So Hazel, in answer to that question, I think the toolkit or the basic blueprint that you would need in order to start building that is probably in this slide deck and in Anne's commentary. And I think if you are following and joining those dots, then your toolkit will start to emerge. Also, I would also dig into previous events in this series. So, for example, around 20% off the job, which is such an important component. We covered that in depth with a couple of training providers and an employer who had already put quite a good process in place with their programs. I'd encourage you to watch that event, because that will be of far more value than anything I could say over the microphone just now. It just remains for me to say thank you to our panelists, Anne Ashworth, Chris Verity and Tony Pitts. Thank you for your time today and for your contribution in the preparation of this event. And thank you to all of you, our audience, for attending. I hope you found it useful, and I bid you good day.